Remember our question? What is the role of government in a free society? Remember that question? How many of you remember that question? Good, I don't feel like a failure. I feel like I succeeded. Okay, all right. What about that question? Well, there's a twofold answer to that question. It's summed up in two statements. When we talk about the role of government, we're talking about two separate statements, and the first one has to do with the primary unalienable right of religious liberty. Jefferson said, freedom of religion is the most sacred of all unalienable rights. Okay, so that's the first part of it. You see, okay, all right. Then the second part of it has to do with what I call the triune principle. Now, what is that triune principle? Now, when I show you this, you're going to recognize the triune principle. You've heard it before. Maybe you don't understand where it came from. But the triune principle goes something like this. And please, bear with me, as this took me several days to do this on... What is this called? PowerPoint. So you PowerPoint people, you should give me a pat on the back when you see this, all right? The triune... Oh, I know, it's amazing. Okay, watch this. Oh, yeah, okay. All right. All right, so the triune principle... Okay, look at that. I know. The triune principle is all about life, liberty, and property. And if you thought that was something, you know, they all work together. I know it. They all work together. They work together in civil society. They work together, okay. But where did they come from? Where does the idea of life, liberty, and property come from? As you know, the Declaration of Independence talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is also identified in every major periodical of the day, that the pursuit of happiness has to do with property. Okay? You say, boy, that's awful worldly. Well, what is your pursuit of happiness, Christian? What are you pursuing? Aren't you wanting to walk with God and live for God? Isn't that your happiness? Amen. So this is not a false statement at all. You know, don't you want to have a home, a house for your family? Of course you do. It's in all of us. We all feel this way. So don't give me this pious stuff about, oh, that's awful material. Just put your little halo down and set it on the seat next to you. Amen? Of course, we want to achieve and do things for the Lord and for our families. So life, liberty, and property, that's the other thing. So you can sum up the role of government like this. Stay out of our consciences and protect our life, liberty, and property. That's it. Yeah. Can you do that? Hey, Mr. Congressman, can you keep your nose out of my conscience? Would you mind doing that, please? Amen. And then secondly, can you go back to Washington and make sure my life, liberty, and property is okay? Stop stealing my property, please. Amen. Stop stealing my money. Stop stealing my liberty. Stop spying on me. Amen. Stop threatening to put me in detention without charging me with a crime. Amen. Stop it. You're supposed to be protecting my liberty, not taking it from me. And every law that we've got, you know, I guess it was Republicans did this. They actually passed a provision because the 111th Congress is going to go down as the worst Congress in the history. Well, maybe this one will. Who knows? Maybe the next one will. But they passed a provision. They said that we will not pass a law unless we first read the bill. Oh, thank you, guys. We really appreciate you doing that. That's kind of like McDonald's saying, we're not going to make a Big Mac from now on, we're not going to make a Big Mac unless there's beef in it. Thank you, guys. That's an amazing statement. Oh. The other thing that they promised is they're not going to pass a law unless they can cite the Constitution, where it's in the Constitution. Well, bust my buttons here, guy. Thank you very much. I appreciate you actually, you know, that's a lot like a preacher saying, from now on, I'm actually going to use the Bible when I preach. Oh, never. Gotta be careful not to. It's hard not to rail, you know. and I'm not trying to rail, I'm just being sarcastic. Okay, I am. I'm just trying to poke fun. But unless that law is protecting my life, liberty, and property, it's useless. All it is extra laws that they're going to make people pay fines, maybe wind up in jail for no good reason. You know, I think we got enough laws. Somebody said the other day, boy, if we don't do something, the Congress is going to shut down. And I was like, yay! I was waiting for this. All right. Now, where does the triune principle come from? And here is the rub. Okay, this is where the rubber's going to hit. You know, the triune principle does come from the Ten Commandments. And it's interesting. Okay, the Ten Commandments, this remarkable document in the book of Exodus. Although Leland said, I don't know why people are so enamored with the Ten Commandments. There's a whole lot more commandments than that in the Bible. But anyway, we'll stick with the Ten Commandments because it's so much in the news. I mean, it's almost like a racket. I sense a Ten Commandment racket out there. Don't you? Come on, you know when people have a racket going. It's a Ten Commandment racket going on out there. You know, Judge Roy Moore had the Ten Commandments removed. So here's how we're going to fight it. Buy a little pen that has the Ten Commandments. That'll fight it. You see the absurdity of some of this? Okay, I'm going to get me a Ten Commandment. I'm going to put this on here and it will stop homosexuality. No, it won't. You'll be out $10 and you'll have a little pin on your lip. That's what. That's right. I mean, we need to start thinking seriously. I'm going to vote for that guy because he's against abortion. And what is it going to do? You know that we had a president. By the way, I'm not against that. Okay, that's fine. I'm glad the guy's against abortion. But you know that a few years ago we had a president, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. They were all supposed to be pro-life. And what did they do about abortion? Nothing. And they never will.
That's right.
Because us stupid Christians actually believed them when they moved their mouth.
Yeah.
How can you tell when a politician's lying? Moves his mouth. All right. We're agreed on this. But the thing that's so beautiful about our system, the way it was originally set up, we thought, okay, where did this triune principle come from? And where did this idea that you stay out of our conscience, where does it come from? Well, it comes from the Ten Commandments. Now, remember I mentioned Judge Roy Moore, and I think that Judge Roy Moore, who was the Supreme Court Justice, the head of the Supreme Court in Alabama, you know the story. He was in charge of the building there, the Supreme Court building, and he decided he was going to bring in a big hunk of granite that had the Ten Commandments on it. And he was going to bring the Ten Commandments in. Listen, everybody. And he did it. And then, of course, the ACLU, oh my goodness, we got to get God out of here. People are going to go blind. Oh! And so they sued to get the monument out. Listen, I got to tell you something. He was the Chief Justice, and according to the Constitution of Alabama, he could have put whatever he wanted there. If he wanted to put a statue of Charlie Brown and Snoopy in there, he could have, because he was in charge of the building, which might have been a good idea. But he didn't do it. He wanted to bring in this Ten Commandments, and you'd have thought that he took a machine gun and shot everybody. Okay? So guess what became the discussion? The discussion was over whether or not he could put the monument in there, if that would somehow violate church and state or whatever. It's ridiculous. He was in charge of the building. If he wanted to put it in there, he could have. And then the next Chief Justice could have came in and ripped it out if they wanted to. He's in charge of the building. Y'all follow what I'm saying? That was the bottom line. But again, everybody's arguing about the Ten Commandments now. So Roy Moore lost his job. And he sued to get it back. And he was sitting, listen folks, he was sitting trying to defend himself in the court. And the liberal judge is sitting here and he's asking him questions about the Ten Commandments. And the judge asked him, by the way, there's not a finer man on planet Earth than Roy Moore. He's a wonderful man. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to criticize him. I think he's probably one of the best men in the country. But Roy Moore was sitting there, and Roy Moore said, of course, I think we should acknowledge God, and the Ten Commandments are the basis of our American jurisprudence. And the judge very wisely said, all 10 commandments? And he said, well, of course. And the judge immediately ruled against it. You say, well, why that? Well, good for nothing judge. Well, the judge happened to know a little bit about history here. The judge wasn't wrong to do it, and I'll tell you why. When we go back to this argument about the Ten Commandments, in the minds of the early American people, the Ten Commandments was divided into two parts. Okay? Society's view of the Ten Commandments. And their view of the Ten Commandments affected civil government ideas. Okay? In the days of the colonies, when discussing civil government, the Ten Commandments were divided into two tables. Now, our Baptist forefathers, such as Roger Williams and John Clark, they took the arguments of their dissenter forefathers and they contended that the first 5 commandments, our first table, could not be legislated by civil government. Did you follow what I just said?
Right.
Williams and Clark and the rest of these Baptists, they said civil government has no business involving itself in the first table of the law. And here's why. I mean, the guy that you work with down at wherever you work, you can't force them to believe the way you believe about the first table. You can't do that. Amen. You just can't. However, and we fought a big battle over this. Baptist people did. The second table, on the other hand, all right, first table, this is important. See that? This is important. Okay? The first 5 commandments, the first table, deal with man's relationship to God or the inner workings of the home. These commands are a part of the conscience. You see, I pastor a church. I have no idea who in my church is right with God.
Right.
I don't know. Only God knows, because it's the inner working of the Spirit. It's the inner working of the conscience. And even if they conform to everything I preach, I still don't know if they're right with God.
That's right.
Because people can outwardly conform, but on the inside be like dead man bones. We know that because Jesus said it.
That's right.
However, the remaining 5 commandments, our second table, deal with man's relationship to his fellow man. This is, you don't steal, you don't covet, you don't take, you don't destroy property, all these things, you don't lie, and these sorts of things, your dealings with your fellow man. And so the Baptists rightly judged that the second table belongs to civil government, not the first. And you know what, folks? They won the argument. Which is why you have religious liberty today.
Amen.
If we didn't have this battle over the first and second table, there would be no America as we know it today. It simply would not exist. Follow what I'm saying, everybody? So this is why the liberal judge looked at Roy Moore and said, I'm not ruling in your favor. Because he didn't even have a handle on the difference between the first and second table. That's why the man asked him the question. And this is why we fail sometimes in the public arena when we think somehow the role of government is to make people holy.
Right.
It doesn't work.
Amen.
It won't work. Stop trying it. It won't work.
Amen.
Somehow we think that somehow now I'm not talking about the fact that, there are some things that are definitely wrong, but those things that are wrong that deal on the civil level have to do with the second table of the law. If you go to Romans 13, you'll see what I'm saying, where the Lord tells us in Romans 13 that the magistrates are there to punish evildoers. Who are the evildoers? Those that violate the second table. Not the first table. The second table. Somebody steals from you, that's a violation of the second table. That's a civil matter that needs to be dealt with in civil courts and civil jurisprudence. When somebody takes the Lord's name in vain, that has to do with the church. Do you know if we do our job as a local church and the civil government does its job, it's a perfect blending of these two laws. And that's how society gets better. It doesn't get better because the government gets better. The government gets better because we get better.
Amen.
And if we mix these things up, we're going to go after the things that are not correct. And we're going to get very, very frustrated, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what's happening. Restraining civil government from enforcing the First Fable is the fundamental principle supporting religious liberty. What Jefferson described as our most sacred of all inalienable rights. So protecting the triune principle is the second table of the law, and that's the role of government. And all I want to know, Mr. Santorum, is will you protect our life, liberty, and property? All I want to know, Mr. Gingrich, is will you protect my life, liberty, and property? All I want to know, Mr. Perry, oh, he's out of it now. Mr. Paul, whoever else is running, I don't even know anymore. A couple of them dropped out recently. Are you going to protect my life, liberty, and property? Are you going to obey that Constitution that the purpose of the Constitution is to protect life, liberty, and property? Okay. I don't know if I got anything else to say. Maybe I do. Let me push the button and see. Hey, yeah, look at the triune principle. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's the inner man. Okay? That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the Second Fable. You say, well, Jefferson must have been a Christian. Do you understand that it really doesn't matter?
Yeah.
Somebody sent me a book, 1,500 pages. I mean, I read a lot, okay? I don't want to read it. I want to read the book. I don't. Because it's 1,500 pages trying to prove that George Washington was a Christian. I got to tell you, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because I'm more concerned about what George Washington said about civil government than I am what he said about God. Now, I happen to think that George Washington was a Christian. And you know that most of the founding fathers were Christians. Okay, but don't get caught up in this rhetoric about, they were all Christians. They weren't.
That's right.
And it wasn't required that they all be Christians. It was required that they understood the second table of the law. That's what was required. And they understood it.
Amen.
They understand it better than those that claim to know God and run for office.
Amen.
John Leland said, beware of the man that speaks, beware the man that runs for office who speaks much of God. He said, because he will use God to get into office, and there can't be a worse scoundrel on planet Earth.
Amen.
He's right. He's right. So, I hope you understand a little bit of what's happening and maybe where we have gone off in our society and so forth. Don't violate the conscience. Protect my life, liberty, and property. Amen. By the way, do you remember, and I'll close with this. You remember in the last election, it was 2 elections ago, for the Senate, we had a Muslim run for Congress. Remember that? Keith Ellison from Minnesota. And everybody was up in arms. Remember why they were up in arms? They were up in arms because when he was going to swear to uphold the Constitution, he was going to put his hand on the Quran.
Yeah.
Everybody was up, oh, how dare him put his hand on the Quran, without even thinking about really what the principles were. I mean, everybody was upset about this. I mean, people throwing stuff around, getting mad, writing letters, because he's going to put his hand on the Quran instead of the Bible. Well, Keith Ellison is a Muslim. How would you like it if somebody was swearing you into office and they said you had to put your hand on the Quran? You probably wouldn't do that, would you? The point is, and the problem is, it didn't matter what book he swore, it's what he swore.
Right.
What do you swear when you become a congressman? You don't swear to uphold the Apostle Paul.
Right.
Okay, what you do is you swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And if he can swear it, and then we watch his behavior to see if he really is doing that, then he can serve.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, he can.
Amen.
Yes, he can. I know what Mark Levine says. You know, I know he's really upset at this. He's upset at me. He's mad at me. But nevertheless, it's the truth that Mark Levine should know, as being a Jew, that the Jewish people in this country have liberty,
Amen.
just like Christians do. Now, I'm not saying, let's not be careful, because we know that there's an element, just like the Catholics, there's an element among the Muslims that would try to marry the church and the state to their Sharia law.
Amen.
And when that begins to happen, we got to know these principles to understand there cannot be Sharia law established in this country because there is a separation from ecclesiastical government and civil government. We cannot lose our principles simply because we get scared
Right.
or frightened. We cannot approach this from an emotional standpoint. It has to be what the principles say. And the principles say no Sharia law. If you want to have a little court in your own church and discipline people according to your first table, fine. If you think you can read their minds, go ahead. But if you're going to punish somebody because they stole from somebody else, that's where our civil government system comes in. And we're not going to be separate. Otherwise, you have to go form your own country.
Amen.
Amen? And that's how we need to think about it, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Any questions? I'm finished, preacher. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Curious. A lot of information here. Anybody want to argue? I love to argue. Okay, yes. Got that.
No, I don't want to argue. I'm curious. But, how do we fix it?
We have to restate the principles. That's number one. And what is so frustrating is that you have well-meaning conservatives that keep writing book after book after book after book, and they do not understand the first and second table, and they're writing books that are flawed in their argumentation concerning what the role of government is. Okay. So we Baptist people, and by the way, our country has looked to the Baptist people for direction in this, and they're looking to us right now, and we're failing miserably. Our colleges, our so-called leadership of the Baptist movement in this country. So we have to write things. We have to write about the first and second table. We have to educate, especially our own children, so that they can recognize the flawed arguments. So it's a tough road. It's kind of like Baptist history itself. When I started traveling around about 7 years ago, trying to inform the leadership of the Baptist movement, and most of them said, "Oh, that's nice, get out of here." But a lot of individual preachers did get a hold of their heritage again, so it's very encouraging. So right now, there is a movement among young people to try to get these principles of liberty back. Okay, it's not a perfect movement. There's a lot of bad in it. But at the core, they're at least going back to the Constitution and asking the right questions. Is this constitutional? Is this the right way? The Tea Party was a knee-jerk reaction to that. The Tea Party began to ask, is Obamacare constitutional? You know how long it had been before that phrase was in the American psyche, if you please? In my lifetime, hardly anybody ever talked about the Constitution. And here we are having the Tea Party actually asking, where in the Constitution do we actually have a warrant to take money from people by force to pay for somebody else's health care?
Commerce clause.
Well, it's not in there. Well, you can use the Commerce Clause if you want to, but the Commerce Clause was explained by Madison in the Federalist Papers. And it has absolutely nothing to do with providing goods and services. The common good is when you protect the liberty of everybody, then that's promoting the common good. In other words, if you really wanted to promote the economy in this country, you don't get up and you say, we're going to create jobs. No. Politicians don't create jobs. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, you liars? Okay, What we can do is we can say, we're going to get the EPA off your back, we're going to get the CDC off your back, we're going to get all these agencies off your back and out of your life so that you can start a business. We're going to get the IRS out of your pocket.
Amen.
Everything you try to do, we tax and tax and tax, you know, and we're going to do away with that. If they really, really wanted to stimulate the economy, that's the approach they would take.
Yeah.
Do you know that there's a lot of people that won't start their businesses until they know if Obama's coming back in office?
Yeah.
They don't want to start the business because they don't want to get involved in all of the paperwork that's already pretty heavy, and it was heavy before he ever got in office. But there's even more now concerning healthcare. And you know, when you take somebody's money without asking them, they used to call that stealing.
Amen.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's in violation of the Second Fable. So anyway, anybody else? That's a good question. Anybody? Yes, sir.
How involved should we get in creating these principles back? I know you said right and so forth. I mean, you know, how, I guess, there's a perception that not to say that it's here necessarily, but there's often a perception in the world that church people, pastors specifically, should be involved in politics as much as politicians should.
Well, my answer to that is, I'm not involved in politics because I'm a pastor. I'm involved in politics because I'm a citizen. I have a right to be involved as a citizen. And for somebody to say, you pastors, you shouldn't be playing, I'm not playing. I mean this. They're the ones that are playing. They're the ones that try to, we got to figure out who two guys are get pit against each other so we can all get beer and watch them fight. You know, that is what politics has become in this country. That's what news has become in this country. Trying to use people that'll body slam each other and then you put the camera on them so you can sell more skinny jeans from Walmart. You know, so to answer your question, you know, you get involved by writing letters, but writing letters, all you get is a form letter back. But it is important that you register complaints. The greatest thing, two things. The two greatest things we can do right now is every time your representative or your senator comes to this area, you need to go to the meetings and ask them point blank, this bill was passed, how in the world does that protect my life, liberty, and property? And you begin to ask those kinds of questions. If once one person starts asking questions like that, people begin to say, hey, yeah, that's right. That's the role of government. Why, you guys are off. You know? And once one or two people begin to think that way and begin to talk that way, then other people begin to pick up on it. And so that's what you can do. The other thing that you can do is there is a movement in this country called nullification. And it's something that I think every Christian ought to look into. It has to do when the federal government pushes too much on the states. And the states have a right to nullify federal law if they think it's infringing their life, liberty, and property. And there's a movement. You can go on the web and just look up nullification. Nullification. And if you can get involved with that, I think it'll do you some good. And there are numbers of nullification rallies, and what happens at these rallies is people come and get educated. You know, and we need that education so that when these congressmen come, we can actually ask them pointed questions that have meaning, and maybe they'll start thinking a little bit. Maybe. And if they don't come around to this kind of thinking, then we need to boot them and put people in there that will understand these principles of liberty. But it happens one at a time. It's very important. John Leland was so involved in, you say involved in government, he was a tremendous revivalist. He baptized more people in America other than Shubal Stearns, but yet he was personal friends with Madison, and it was Leland's influence on Madison that gave rise to the Bill of Rights. So this is the influence of one preacher, one Baptist preacher, that gave us the Bill of Rights. That's a fact of history. So we got to talk. Talk it up. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I was in one meeting. I went to this meeting. Our congressman came in and said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have the stimulus package. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And a lady raised her hand and said, well, how are we going to pay for this? Good question. He said, well, what we're going to do is blah, blah, and he never answered the question. So he goes on to the next question with somebody else, and I hollered out, you never answered the question! And it got his attention. So he went back and he said, well, yes, I did. I answered the question, blah, blah, blah. And then everybody said, no, you didn't! And it's that kind of thing. And I'm not saying to be rude, but if they're not going to answer the question, they're working for us. We're not working for them.
That's right.
You slave, you. No, you're not a slave. They're working for us. And if they don't listen to what we're saying, then we fire them. It's as simple as that. If they don't listen to us, hey, we're shooting. I mean, that's just ridiculous. You know, and the media will say, well, there's pretty rude people at these meetings. Do you blame them for being rude?
Amen.
You've been trampled on for all these years, your money's stolen from you? Now, look, these children right here, they're going to have to pay for the stupid stimulus package. They will. We'll never pay it off. They'll have to pay for it. That doesn't make you mad? I'm getting mad thinking about it right now.
Amen.
You shouldn't be mad. You know, I don't know. I'm not Jesus, but he got a little angry
That's right.
at these things that were blatantly wrong. So, anybody else have a question? It's a really good question. Yeah, sir?
Yeah. Before I say it, I would say I wasn't against it. In reference to protect life, liberty, and property, what do we do about the 16th Amendment?
I don't know what you mean. What do you
The
mean?
16th Amendment states that Congress has the power to levy an income tax.
Yeah. Well, I think that we ought to get rid of that. I think we ought to. I think that we ought to find some way to repeal it. There's a list of about 10 things that I think are intolerable. That's one of them. The Patriot Act is intolerable. The fact that the American people have tolerated this is absolutely unbelievable. The creation of Viper teams and so forth, the Department of Homeland Security and all the things that they've added, more government, these things are intolerable. They need to be done away with. So we need a president and a Congress that's got the courage to get rid of these things. But you're right about the income tax. We didn't have the income tax until 1913. The only reason we have an income tax now is to pay, basically it pays the interest on the national debt. It doesn't even pay the national debt. It just pays the interest on the national debt. The national debt was created so that we will be perpetually in debt.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fed. Get rid of it.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to do something very interesting, check out the monetary and the foreign policy of every president that was either assassinated or there was an attempt on his life. Those foreign, so you're a conspiracist. No, it's just so obvious it's not even funny. Andrew Jackson, the attempt on Jackson's life, Jackson was the one that ended the central bank.
Amen.
Amen.
Jackson's life, Jackson was the last one to destroy the public debt, get rid of the public debt, and somebody tried to shoot him. Do the math. You don't have to be Columbo either. You know what Columbo is? Yeah, I got a question. You know, you don't have to be Columbo here. You should be able to figure it out. It's a racket.
That's right.
It's a racket. It needs to stop. Anybody else? Don't throw things at me yet. Let me get out of the building before you start criticizing. Okay. Anybody else? Maybe I'm preaching to the choir here. I don't know. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
When we talk to people, people have no idea. And when you start any kind of conversation, people really have, they aren't basing any of their decisions at all based upon what any perceived amount of liberty is. That they only take it from an emotional side.
Yeah.
How do you have any idea of how to pierce through that with
Yeah.
people that you talk to?
Yes, and I've thought about it a lot. Information is what helps people because eventually people start thinking. Most people don't like to think outside the box because they're comfortable in that box. So sometimes you have to say something to make them a little angry. So they start thinking outside the box a little bit. But as far as civil government concepts and principles are concerned, I always argue one thing, and that is, what is the role of government? You tell me, what is the role of government? And based on their answer, you should say, no, that's not the role of government. And was not the role of government, what you're describing to me, is a 20th century phenomenon. You know, or it's a 19th century phenomenon. This is not what the founders said. All we're supposed to have is a government that operates in such a way that it protects our life, liberty, and property. And all these extra things are just not constitutional. And when you bring it back to the role of government and the Constitution, they cannot even argue it. They'll just call you a name. But that's what I'm doing. The only thing that I can do is just go back to the role of government. What is it? Yes.
The same concept as what he was saying. Oftentimes when you talk to people, they take the conversation in the direction of emotions, terrorism. What's really driven the increase in government lately has been, or the last 10 years has been the whole terrorism. The terrorism idea. The idea that we have terrorists everywhere, we've got to get them. And anybody that's not for getting the terrorists aren't considered seriously. They're not considered serious candidates for political office, serious patriots or anything like that. So I guess that you answered the question by taking them back to the reason why, is our role as the United States government is our responsibility to go everywhere in all the world to get terrorists? What's the purpose of our government?
Well, that's exactly right. And the more that you say that, you might get made fun of, but people will begin to think. Most of the American people don't want our soldier boys and girls 4,000 to 5,000 miles away, fighting when there's not even an enemy. There's not an army to fight. So it's very frustrating for them. They're trying to serve their country, and they go over there, and their assignment is what? It's very difficult. And there's a number of them that come back cuckoo. They just come back. They're losing their minds. So you go back to the role of government. And the role of government is certainly is not for us to invade every country that we think might hurt us.
Amen.
I spoke in Virginia, about 10 miles away from the headquarters of the Department of Homeland Security. I was preaching in a meeting, and they advertised it in the area that I was going to come and speak on American principles. And a couple people from the Department of Homeland Security showed up. And as this was a Baptist meeting, we had chicken afterwards. And I was eating chicken, and one of these Department of Homeland Security guys sat across from me, and he said that this guy said, I take umbrage on what you said in there. I said, oh yeah, what did I say? What did I say you didn't like? He said, well, you're talking about the Patriot Act, saying this was a bad thing. I said, it is a very bad thing. He said, well, I work for the Department of Homeland Security. I happen to think it's a very good thing. I said, why? Why do you think it's a good thing? Tell me why you think it's a good thing. He said, we need to stop these people before they do something. We need to stop them before they do something. I said, okay, listen, you need to listen to your self-talk.
Amen.
I said, are you telling me that we should incarcerate people because we think they might do something? You do know there's a Fourth Amendment. Do you know what's in the Fourth Amendment? You cannot incarcerate someone without probable cause. You cannot keep somebody a prisoner without charging them. And chicken was coming out of my mouth. Because it's just absolute madness.
Amen.
It's madness. And a lot of my Baptist preacher friends, they think I'm the one that's crazy, but I'm not.
Amen.
If we invade Iran, it's going to provoke China. Is that what you want? really what you want. You better think about this.
Amen.
Yes.
I mean, I agree to that
Yeah.
with the Fourth Amendment, if they're an American citizen. I don't believe that we should, I don't believe that we need to read Miranda rights to enemy combatants, those types of things. I think
If they're not an American citizen?
yeah, if they're not an American citizen.
If they're not American-
But at what point do you justify the use of force against a foreign power? For instance,
Mhm.
in Iran, they burn the American flag, they scream death to America, and they are developing nuclear weapons. At one point in time, do you think, okay, I don't want to commit ground troops, but maybe I should bomb the snot out of the nuclear facilities to keep them from passing those things off to people that would do us harm? I mean, at what point do we have to justify preemptive measures by what you're saying? I mean, at what point can we say, look, the writing's on the wall, this foreign power, it's in their belief system that we are infidels, they want to destroy us. They're developing nuclear weapons. At what point do you say, okay, we have to defend ourselves? Is it after a mushroom cloud goes up? I mean, that's the whole fear factor. And I understand the whole, the government uses the fear factor in order to control us.
Yeah, it is.
So, because, they understand that power is absolutely nothing without control.
All right, so let's go back to the first question,
Yes.
which is detaining somebody that's not an American citizen. Up until 9/11, if we suspected somebody had committed a crime, they were not an American citizen, we would turn them over to the country of their origin. This is what we would do. And I think we should still do that.
I agree.
We shouldn't be detaining them using our tax money, to detain somebody and keep them alive for a period of time or whatever. But if they're not being charged with it, we should charge them and take them back as we did before 9/11 happened. We should continue that practice. So yeah, I mean, if somebody we have evidence that they've done this. My problem is there's no evidence and we just suspect it. I don't see how you could hold anybody when you just suspect it. Okay, and
I agree.
that's all I'm trying to say. Now, if there's evidence, of course, if there's evidence, you take it to a grand jury and you charge the person. That's how our criminal justice system works. If you have a foreigner, you turn them over to that foreign government. If that foreign government doesn't prosecute that person, then we have other things that go into play. And I don't know all of them because I'm not a lawyer. My point is when somebody's not being charged and it's just suspicion. If somebody's being called an enemy combatant, it is a well-known fact that the Patriot Act gives the president the authority to declare somebody an enemy combatant. And let me go a step further with this. The reason why there isn't more of an uproar is in the Patriot Act, those that have been arrested under the Patriot Act cannot tell anyone that they've been arrested under the Patriot Act, and that's why you don't see it on CNN, you don't see it on MSNBC, you don't see it because under normal circumstances,